Well, it'd be tough to start this show with anything other than the big news out of Miami, and that is Jimmy Butler has formally requested a trade anywhere but Miami. He's given him the whole, I ain't going home, but I can't stay here kind of thing. I don't think that expression applied. Jimmy Butler, a Heat, seemingly no longer. The other big stories out of Thursday night has Naz Reid started to take from a slumping Rudy Gobert. Cam Johnson tweaked his ankle on basically the last play of the ball game and left the arena on crutches. D'Lo left with cramps, but had 12 assists before doing so, and his first two games in Brooklyn look freaking great. Dennis Schroeder finally had a good ball game for the Golden State Warriors. Is he worth hanging on to a little bit longer? Jonathan Kuminga, is he a sell high? Or is there another half to this? And Max Christie set a career high in points that blew through his previous career high in the Lakers' late game. And those are the big stories from Thursday. But the one story that creates a looming shadow over all the others is definitely Jimmy Butler. There's really no other way to look at that one. Butler, for the better part of what we're at now, like a week and a half. Remember, he left that ball game. What day was that? Let's get the exact day on this one while we're talking about Jimmy. So Butler left the game on December 20th. That's been 2 weeks now, with what was initially ruled an ankle tweak and then a stomach bug. Then he sat out 5 games, and we're learning now in retrospect there was a threat of suspension and other weird stuff. And since coming back, he's played 2 games, 25 minutes and 27 minutes, and he's been fully disengaged. And so after the ball game last night, he was asked, or he brought up this idea that he's not feeling joy playing basketball right now. And a reporter asked the follow-up question, can you feel joy playing for the Miami Heat anymore? And Jimmy said, probably not. So after the game, the story then, not surprisingly, got bigger. Shams tweeting that he'd formally requested a trade, which, by the way, sort of harkens back to the Shams tweet from a couple weeks even before all of this started, saying that Jimmy Butler was interested in leaving Miami, and then Jimmy's agent publicly calling out Shams and saying, nah, your intel is crap, you're crap, blah, blah, blah. Well, now the agent looks like an idiot, and Shams obviously looks like the guy who got everything right, because look what freaking happened less than a month later. It like mere weeks is all it took for Shams to be proven right. So the agent looks like a moron. Shams looks like the winner. Jimmy Butler looks like a guy who just complains anytime he gets bored in a particular city. And someone's going to take a shot on him because at the end of the day, he's a guy that basically carried a slapdick roster to the NBA Finals. Sorry to the rest of the roster. I mean, there's some good players on that team, but that was not a championship caliber roster. And Jimmy Butler hoisted them on his shoulders and took them there. But he's never healthy in the regular season. He has all this, like, how many times is he going to get himself traded away from a place, or like a place just not want him anymore, before people are like, oh, yeah, like maybe it's the guy? The answer is, I would think at least one more time. Because with the amount of parity in the NBA right now, some team is going to look out there and they're going to see a guy like Jimmy Butler, and they're going to say, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a headache at some point, but this is a guy that can maybe take us up and over the top this year right now. Championship windows are fleeting, especially in this moment where, yeah, the Thunder look really, really, really good, but we've also seen a certain vulnerability in that team when the game slows down. The Celtics look a little fatigued right now and a little dinged up after the finals run and Olympics and all that stuff. The Cavaliers look amazing, but what do we know about them? A lot of teams, I think, listen, this isn't my opinion. This is what's happening. A lot of teams are looking at the NBA landscape and saying, we've got a shot. So someone's going to go take a chance on Jimmy Butler. I don't know who it's going to be. The odds market says that they think it's going to be either the Mavericks, the Warriors, or the Rockets, which, yeah, I mean, I could get on board with that. We know the Warriors want to make a splash, and they actually have one, maybe two young players that teams might be interested in taking off their hands, like a Jonathan Kuminga, which brings us to the rest of today's analysis. First of all, quick hitter version. Is there anybody you're picking up with this Jimmy Butler news? No, absolutely not. We've seen Jimmy miss 5 games in the last 2 weeks. Nobody stepped up consistently for the Heat. It was a different 1 or 2 guys every single ball game. That's the kind of crap that'll happen again if Butler gets put on ice, which is kind of what it feels like is going to happen here. Is there anybody on other teams you should pick up and stash with the expectation that maybe they end up on the Heat? Also, no, because taking someone away from Miami didn't make anybody step up. So why would someone step up if you not only take Butler away, but then put someone in his place? Unless that player was someone that was already good, in which case they probably were already rostered. Let's get into the full breakdown. After I remind you guys, of course, that BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform, our amazing partner, and your number one source for online betting. They've got the earliest odds, in-game live betting, and the ability to watch the games as they happen. You get to watch them. Get to watch your bets as they're going. They get the largest selection of odds on everything from football. NFL playoffs are going on now, right? That's kicking off. Or is there one more week? Doesn't matter. I don't know about football. The NBA, college basketball, hockey, UFC. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the fun. And don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for a welcome bonus on your very first deposit. BetOnline. The game starts here. Now we can officially get into yesterday's news because there wasn't that much besides the Jimmy Butler thing. And look, we're going to loop back around to Jimmy Butler at some point later in the show because I think there's more to talk about on that front. But let's go through the other stuff first. Boston beat Minnesota. This was a tight ball game. Al Horford looked a little bit more like himself, filling in for Kristaps Porzingis. Sam Hauser filled in for Jaylen Brown and did have 5 3-pointers, but he had 5 3-pointers by the middle of the third quarter and then didn't get to do much after that. So a little good, a little bad on that one. He's a 3-point stream anytime that Tatum or Brown is out. Drew Holiday, not surprisingly, got to do a little bit extra with no KP and no Brown. And it's nice to see Drew's shoulder as well. It's also nice to see the fact that he is now number 101 in 9 category leagues. That is a 9th rounder. He is a mere 1 round away from where he was drafted, and all the hemming and hawing seems to be for nothing because he's fine. Peyton Pritchard is sort of bouncing back and forth between really big games and really small ones. You're not going to worry about that because as long as a bunch of guys keep missing time for the Celtics, then you just keep rumbling. Julius Randle had a nice ball game. This is kind of a nice little twist. Anthony Edwards has fallen off a cliff after his quick start to the year. Teams are basically just bringing doubles and triples, and there's not a whole lot he can do about it. Anthony Edwards has now dropped to number 40 in 9 category leagues. Still hitting 4 3-pointers a game, but everything else has really stayed the same for him. And that was kind of the big fear of like, what else is there to do? Especially now that teams are keying in on him even more than they were in the past. It'll be fine, but this is why I wanted nothing to do with that dude as a first rounder. Dante DiVincenzo's a hold. Mike Conley remains a drop. Rudy Gobert, who's been pretty craptastic lately, is both craptastic, but also a buy low. Jade McDaniels had one of his up games. Naz Reid had another good one. He's starting to come on here with Gobert kind of looking particularly whack lately. And we've had like 3 or 4 decent Naz games in a row. And this is without anybody getting hurt still. Wolves continue to be the healthiest damn team in the NBA. And Naz is still showing signs of life. And I think he's probably more of a like the top of the filler bunch right now with the massive upside if anybody even misses a moment. And you got to figure at some point they will, but we're 40% of the way down into the year, and they haven't yet. Active stash? Best waiver wire fodder type? Somewhere right in between there? Pacers beat the Heat. Heat are obviously in a weird spot right now. Tyrese Halliburton, 33 points, 15 assists. I don't know what happened to the free throw line. Weird twist. But with this massive ball game, he is now up to number 19 on the year. Again, all the hemming and hawing for naught. He's basically been around the edge of the first round after his slow start, and he's been Halliburton over that stretch. Andrew Nemhart, 6-6-6. I still think he's a punt threes only play. Obi Toppin back to the role he had before, which is, I think, kind of an efficiency schedule play. And then Benedict Mathurin as a points streamer only. And for the Heat, I mean, this is where things get goofy because Jimmy Butler's probably going to get pulled out of the lineup. But last time that happened, it was like Rozier one night, and then Jaquez the next night, and then Highsmith the night after that, and then Duncan Robinson, and then it looped back around. In this one, Kel'el Ware had 25 points. He has a great fantasy profile, but he's full on buried behind Bam Adebayo. And the reason he got to do more in this one is because Bam played 25 minutes in a blowout loss. Tyler Hero was the only Heat who got close to normal minutes. He wasn't having a particularly good ball game, but you'll forgive him this one because every time I call Hero a sell high, he just launches into another scoring barrage. So maybe I should stop talking about it, and maybe he'll quietly kind of fade back to the top 50 or farther range. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, I'm not picking anybody up without Butler. The guy I hoped would be more consistent was Terry Rozier, and he hasn't been. But I do wonder if they might not have a choice. Still, basically, all the evidence we have on Miami right now points to all those names I just talked about. Rozier, Jovic, throw him into the mix, Jaquez, Highsmith, Duncan Robinson, even Alec Burks every once in a while. There's like 5 or 6 guys that are going to trade off doing Jimmy Butler's usage, and none of them is going to end up rosterable. Clippers lost at the Thunder. No James Harden, so this game was over. But a little after halftime. Clippers got off to a quick start. Thunder very much were doing the whole like, oh, this will be easy. There's no Harden thing, and then the Clippers jumped on them, and then OKC was like, oh, I guess we got to focus for a minute, and then it ended pretty quick after that. Everybody sucked. If you somehow managed to play Amir Coffey, congratulations. That's would have been a very odd choice. Norman Powell was due for an absolute train wreck of a ball game, and that is very much what this one was. Pushed him back to the edge of the top 50. It sounds, by the way, like Kawhi Leonard might be playing within the week. And that is your cue to try to get a top 50 guy for Norman Powell, because he ain't going to be a top 50 dude when Kawhi comes back. At least not once Kawhi gets slightly ramped up. So maybe briefly after he comes back. Yeah. If Harden has to miss any other games going forward, I think I would probably look more at Kevin Porter Jr., although he's more of a points league option than a category league. Just the guy that would usually pick up some of the usage in those spots. The Thunder are a fully uninteresting fantasy team. Shea is very good. Isaiah Hartenstein is very good. Jalen Williams has been pretty good after his torrid start to the year, but he's fallen back to the middle of the second round, which is still solid, but not number 6 anymore. And then there's about 15 guys that alternate between being half decent around those main 3 dudes. So just a bunch of schedule plays and 3 regulars. Brooklyn. This is a fun one. I mean, other than the injury news in the last 25 seconds of the ball game, Cam Thomas played only 22 minutes. They're kind of slowly bringing him back along off the extended absence. I wouldn't worry too much about it. He played 25 minutes on the 29th, played 22 minutes in this one. I would assume that he hovers in the 24-minute range for another game or two, and then they'll probably bump him up. All that means for Thomas, though, is that he's going to take a shot literally every single time he touches the basketball. Because if they're like, oh, you get to play 22 minutes, he's like, great, 22 minutes, I'll get my 22 shots. And he did. As he gets revved up, I don't think he's going to take 32 shots in 32 minutes. I think it'll probably stay near 20, which places him pretty firmly like around where he was before. A little bit above that, I guess, because he was at about 18 shots, and that probably ticks up to 19. So, I don't know, top 75, top 80 is within reach for Cam. Cam Johnson hurt his ankle at the very end of this ballgame. He landed on Zaire Williams' foot and left the arena on crutches, although x-rays were negative. So, we'll wait on the, is it 1 week, is it 2 weeks kind of thing on Johnson, who presumably is on the trade block. We've heard that a bunch of teams are interested. That would not be good for him. But it is worth noting that he's putting up top 40 value with 13 shots a game. He's not getting 13 shots where he's going, but he's still, because of his ability to be a high percentage, big time 3-point dude, he can carry fantasy value even in a smaller role. Again, it won't be this good, but I also don't think that it's going to be like he trends to a drop. That sounds extremely unlikely to me. So let's hope he's not out for very long. Nick Claxton is showing signs of life. Frankly, having D'Lo around, I think, is going to be a big help for Claxton. And if Schroeder was still there as Claxton's gotten his back to stop aching quite so much, that would have also been the key. But he needs a point guard. He's not going to go get his own shot. He needs somebody that can actually get him the ball in a more traditional pick and roll offense, and D'Lo can be that guy. 12 assists for D'Angelo is not going to be the norm. He's not going to average 12 assists, but he's the point guard. Cam Thomas is a scoring guard. Cam Johnson is a scoring wing. D'Lo's the point guard on this team. I know Ben Simmons was out, but Ben Simmons also is not good at basketball anymore. He's slow. He's clunky. He can't shoot. There's too many easy ways to defend a player like that in the half court. D'Lo can actually do stuff in the half court. Can't guard anyone, but he can create on offense. So enjoy it. I'm assuming that this cramp will go away and he'll play in the next ball game, but it didn't sound like a particularly big deal. Jalen Wilson had 37 minutes under his belt in this game. Keon Johnson played 28. I'm not super interested in those guys outside of schedule type plays. And I do also believe that as Cam Thomas revs back up to his additional 10 minutes and D'Lo probably gets into the 30s, you see these other guys take an even smaller role going forward. Milwaukee has hit the skids a tiny bit off the play-in tournament win, which I'm a little worried that the league is going to realize this is happening and then try to change the way that is. I mean, it was such a slow schedule during those weeks. I don't know what more they can do. I mean, ultimately, the Bucks are going to be fine. But Dame has been bad his last couple, coming back off the calf thing that he probably played through. Middleton had a rare down game. Giannis was fine, but, the free throws continue to be an issue. The only thing to really pay attention to with Milwaukee right now is that Brook Lopez is losing time to a hot Bobby Portis. As soon as Bobby cools off, the minutes will pivot back to Brook Lopez. And so you're in a little bit of a Brook Lopez buy scenario right now. And you're definitely in a Bobby Portis sell scenario right now, if you can pull those things off. I'm not saying you should sell one for the other. I don't think one would be enough for the other, but just see what you can get. For Portis, I would literally take anyone who is a rest of season guy. And for Brook Lopez, I would buy him for someone in the 75, 80 range, which might work right now because he's fallen into the 60s. I mean, you could probably get him for like a DeAndre Ayton, who's going to be very annoying to roster in about a month and a half. Philly got steamrolled by a very hot Warriors team. If you had Tyrese Maxey or Joel Embiid, you survived this game. Otherwise, not so much. Paul George, a little bit of a buy window again after the Giant ball game. Gershon Yabusele played 31 minutes. Don't read too much into that. It's big three for Philly at this point. There's really nobody else. Kelly Oubre, when he comes back, is the closest to a top 100 play when the team's healthy, if only because he will get a nice bump every time George or Embiid sits a ball game. Although PG played the back-to-back here. So it's just Joel now. Warriors couldn't miss, so there's fantasy value for days. They shot 61% as a team for this game. Steph Curry made all 8 of his three-pointers. Someone was asking if I was worried about Steph Curry at one point this year. I was like, what? In what respect? What are we worried about? He's number 14. That's probably where he's going to hover. If the field goal percent happens to tick up a little bit, great. Draymond Green bouncing back after some very bad games. He'll buy himself some more time on my team. Andrew Wiggins is a hold. The two players that I think deserve a tiny bit of discussion, 3 players, excuse me, Trace Jackson Davis, Dennis Schroeder, and Jonathan Kuminga. Let's talk TJD. This is his first down game in a while. And everybody was like, are you going to panic? I'm like, well, why would I panic? He's still Trace Jackson Davis. He's not like a guaranteed fantasy play every night. But the dude had 6 good games in a row. The best players in the NBA have a bad game every 7 games. So let's not freak out. In addition to the fact that 21 minutes for Jackson Davis is close to enough for him to post value anyway. Obviously, we want 25 or 26 minutes, but that might not be the case every ball game, especially if, one, it's a blowout, two, he's tasked with dealing with Joel Embiid. It'll be fine. Hang on. Let's see what happens. Jonathan Kuminga, 20 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. He's on a heater, which, these happen from time to time. But we also know enough about Kuminga's fantasy game to know where it levels off. So here's the nice thing. Over the last 2 weeks, he's number 72 in 9-cat, shooting 50% from the field, 72 at the free throw line, 22, 7-3 with a steal and 1.3 3-pointers. Is there a place he could go where he would consistently get 15 shots per game every night the rest of the year? The answer is yes, but it's not Miami. Not when that team's got Hero and Bam and 22 other guys that they're trying to work in. This is a premier sell high moment for Jonathan Kuminga. Someone is going to go, ooh, it's happening, and be willing to give you a top 80 guy. So go target someone like, honestly, funny thing is I don't like DeAndre Ayton, but I would certainly take him over Kuminga. I would take Tyus Jones over Jonathan Kuminga, but then I also like the assist to turnover ratio guys. Bradley Beal, who's always hurt. You might be able to go old instead of young. Miles Bridges. I would take PJ Washington as soon as we know more about the knee sprain. Maybe don't do it right now. Rudy Gobert, who's been the worst, you could probably get for Jonathan Kuminga right now, and you probably should, because this is the floor for Gobert, and this is the ceiling for Kuminga. And then Schroeder, I don't think anything I saw yesterday really changed how I felt about Dennis, which is, for those that haven't been watching the show, basically, he almost couldn't have shot any worse since coming to Golden State. He was shooting like 28% as a Warrior. I think yesterday's game bumped him up to 32% as a Warrior. So he's at 10.4 shots per game. And for Schroeder, if he can get up to 11, he can probably post close to fantasy value. It won't be great, but 11 shots per game in the past has gotten him to somewhere in the 13, 14 points, 5 to 6 assists range, which I think is a conceivable target for him. Yesterday's game, you can't grade it all out. He played 25 minutes, but also the game was a huge blowout, and he would have probably gotten another 4 or 5 late. And if he starts to hit some shots, then you're in business. Now, is this a start of a hot stretch? I don't know. Is he just going to level off after the extremely cold first 3 or 4 games with the Warriors? I also don't know about that. But what we've seen from Schroeder so far in Golden State is just barely enough to hang on and see how it goes. The downside of all of this is that even if everything breaks right for Schroeder in Golden State, he's still probably looking at a 90 type of rank. Because when he's not the feature point guard, which is what he was in Brooklyn, Steph Curry is that guy in Golden State. If he's not the featured dude, he doesn't really have the statistical profile to be a great 9-cat guy. The assists need to carry the day with Dennis, or scoring. And if those things are not there, meaning if the usage isn't as high as it was in Brooklyn, he falls off quick because he's not a big 3-point or steals guy. I know in this game he had 5 of those combined, but usually those are not points of big emphasis, although he is taking more threes this season. So at least there's that, I guess. But I think there's still enough there to hang on. Point guard type of stat dudes are not that easy to find on the waiver wire. He's a positive free throw shooter. That's also a little bit helpful. And, coming off a good ball game, you can afford yourself the flexibility to just let it go a little bit longer. Portland, I feel like I'm repeating myself, which is boring. I don't like to repeat myself, so let's just lightning round through all the players. Anthony Simons is a sell high guy when things are going good. Same story for Jeremy Grant, who didn't play in this ballgame. Denny Avdia, this is a look, by the way, at what Denny could be if Jeremy Grant gets moved or shut down. This is why when the team is healthy, when Portland's healthy, I'm not a huge Denny Avdia guy. It's not because I don't like his fantasy game. It's just because he's stuck behind the one dude that's log jamming him on usage. If Jeremy Grant gets out of the way, Avdia becomes point forward when he's on the floor. And it's not because like they need a point guard. It's just that's what his game sort of equates to. Now, his percentages were good in this one, which is not always the case. And his turnovers were low in this one, which is definitely not always the case. He had a 10 turnover game 1 game ago. He puts up points. He puts up rebounds. He puts up assists. His field goal percent is not terrible. Free throw number has been a little bit better this year, which is notable. That's actually kind of a big deal. He has been, in my opinion, way over rostered to this point in the season as someone who's basically been in the 140 range every single week all year for whatever reason. This last week it's because of the turnovers. The week before that it was because of field goal percent or whatever. Like there's always something that's been holding him into that pocket. But if Jeremy Grant gets out of the way, the good will outweigh the bad. That's the pathway forward. You're not going to be able to buy on him after yesterday's game. You're going to want to buy on Avdia when Grant is in, which hopefully will be soon, so that way you get a little bit of a window there. Toumani Camara had a nice ball game. I wouldn't read too much into that. He's the king of the streamers, but has not been more than that. Scoot Henderson is a punt play. The fact that he's finally actually getting playing time now is really nice, so you can lean into the punt turnover, typically punt field goal guy. Donovan Clingan is not playing enough to matter, nor is Delano Banton, and Robert Williams is out these days. DeAndre Ayton is a hold, sell. He's basically like Simons and Jeremy Grant. He's a sell guy as soon as you can get a window to do it. And then Shaden Sharp, who's never going to be a great 9 category guy, is a perfectly reasonable punt play. He's ranked 170th right now, but a lot of that's because his field goal percent is dookie. It's dookie. He doesn't do that much other stuff, but, the scoring is hard to find, and he's sort of like a glorified Benedict Mathurin. Lakers played without Anthony Davis, so that meant that more stuff was there to go around. I personally got this guess wrong. I thought you'd see a Rui Hachimura usage bump. We did not. He has been, as expected, pretty dramatically impacted by Dorian Finney-Smith. But in this game, the Lakers went with 36 center minutes. That was kind of surprising, like legitimate ones. Jackson Hayes played 18. Christian Koloko played 18, which left very few small ball center minutes for Rui Hachimura. So he ended up jamming in there with Dorian Finney-Smith, mostly just sharing the power forward minutes. I don't know. We want to say Rui's the power forward or LeBron James. Doesn't really matter. And then Dorian Finney-Smith, also a guy who could float up and play small ball center. This is a pretty good indicator that Rui is cooked, like fully cooked. If he can't get something going when AD's out, then there's kind of no reason anymore. LeBron, Austin Reeves are the obvious ones. Duh. We don't need to talk about those guys. Max Christie has, just from like what he's brought to the Lakers, he's been spectacular. This particular game, from a fantasy standpoint, he was spectacular. But there's a limited nature to what Max Christie can offer on a basketball court, fantasy-wise. Threes, steals, and free throw percent. That's basically it. The field goal percent is running hot. Like, duh. 3 of his last 5 games, he's shot 56 to 63% from the field. Overall, in his career, he's hovering around 43%. He's not just magically going to become a 55% shooter from the field. But he's a decent floor spacer. He can slash. Like, he does the things that the Lakers need him to do. But what you guys need to care about is, does that translate to fantasy? And the answer is generally no. I might be convinced to use him against a games cap if Austin Reeves has to miss a game, because then there's just so much backcourt available that Max would have to play like 38 minutes, and almost anybody can put fantasy value up in 38 minutes. But in this ball game, he just got really hot. He hit a bunch of three-pointers. The other stuff was all kind of to be expected. The 2 steals, that's like, he's probably not going to average 2, but getting steals is repeatable. But almost no rebounds, very few assists. This was the best case scenario game, and he's going to get added everywhere, and then he's going to get dropped everywhere. The time to use Max Christie is when the Lakers have a good schedule, which was the case, by the way. Starting yesterday, they had 3 games in 4 nights as part of a back-to-back. The Lakers' schedule gets extraordinarily predictable starting today. Tonight, through January 27th, the Lakers play every other day for 3 consecutive weeks. That's weird, by the way. That doesn't happen very often. Although, again, we've talked about how evenly balanced the schedule is right now. That's the type of thing that's going to come from it. Just not as many back-to-backs blended in there. More teams that are just going every other day. So, no, I'm not adding Mac. I'm not picking up Christie against a games cap. I would happily use him in a 4-game week. I would happily use him when they've got 3 games in 4 nights or anything better than that because he makes the team a lot better, and so he's going to be on the floor. But, again, against the games cap, yeah, it's too much of a dice roll. There's your recap show. A lot of it about Jimmy Butler, mind you, but, not all of it. Coming up later on today on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball, we're going to do our weekly hot cold edition. Who are the hottest and coldest players in the NBA? And can we trade for them or sell them off? We already mentioned a couple of names in there, guys that have been hot, guys that have been cold, that have sort of come up over the course of talking about the boxes in the last couple of days. But on that show, Hot and Cold, that's when we really just focus in, isolate the key dudes, and see if we can make some deals on them. Tomorrow morning, we'll have a weekend review show. We'll do one more Saturday weekend review episode because it's the holiday weeks. We've had the NBA Cup weeks. We had the holiday weeks. Starting next week, we're back to normal. Kids are in school. I will have my mornings free again, and we'll get back to the normal plan of attack, which in a perfect world, we'll be able to do the weekend review show now. The Friday morning episode would be that one. And then if we do a show on Saturdays, which may or may not happen every week going forward, I'm trying to do it where I can, it would just be a Friday night recap because it kind of sucks to have the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday games all happen without a recap show. And that was the whole point of starting the Saturday morning show. And then holidays happen, and I was like, these teams are playing 1.5 games a week. I can't do a weekend review show on Friday. I got to give them another day. And then Sunday, we'll do our week preview show. That'll be for the 12th week of the season. Yahoo will call it week 11. It's not the 11th week. It's period 11, week 12 next week. I'm starting to get mad about this. By the way, tomorrow, just in case we don't talk about it between now and then, pick up some Phoenix Suns. The bad part of their schedule is over after tonight, and then they play tomorrow. They're off Sunday, and they go 5 times next week. There are 5 teams, by the way, right now that are floating near a 5-game and 7-day stretch. So there's some really nice long streaming options out there, and we'll tweet about that. A pretty good reason to follow on social media. At Dan Bespris, DanBesbris, my daily favor I ask of you, please go pre-like our trade deadline live show. It is approaching 300 pre-likes. I want to get to 1,000 before we launch the show on February 6th. We have, it's 28 days left this month, 6 days next. So 34 days between now and then. We're at 293. So looking for 707 more likes. I'll tell you, once we cross the 500 threshold, I'll start to feel better about us getting there. That link is in the show description. Please go pre-like that trade deadline show. Subscribe to our channel. Back with you later on today with Hot and Cold. I'm Dan Bespris for Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Bye.